Advocacy Manager with Colorado Common Cause. Thank you all so much for being here today. I can't believe that we filled this room to talk about ALEC, which is one of my favorite topics. First of all, I want to acknowledge all of the different people who've been working on ALEC resistance planning for their conference that will be taking place. ALEC will be in Denver next week, Wednesday through Friday. A group of us have been talking about how we are going to resist ALEC coming into our state and our town and fight back. So I just want to thank a slew of organizations: Sierra Club, Conservation Colorado, AFL-CIO, AFT, AFSCME, the Boulder Area Labor Council, the Denver Area Labor Federation, FRES, Colorado Fiscal Institute, Progress Now Colorado, State Innovation Exchange, PR Watch, Metro Denver Community Rights, Jaws of Justice, Colorado Education Association, Move to Amend, NARAL Pro-Choice Colorado, Colorado Ethics Watch, and Mi Familia Vota. Thank you all so much for making this possible. So before we delve into what we're here to discuss today, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, a little bit of housekeeping. If you do not yet know where the bathrooms are, they are located to the left and right of the staircase on every single level. If you need help accessing the upper levels, there is an elevator here. Let me know if you need help accessing and I can get you to where you need to go. So the way that the day is going to work, if you look at your agenda, which you should have gotten, if you don't have an agenda, there are agendas in the back where you signed up. Basically, we're going to be doing our educational panel. We have amazing panelists today that Elena is about to introduce. We're going to do the educational panel for the first hour, then we're going to take a 30-minute breakout session. This is an opportunity for you to take a deeper dive into one of these issue areas to see how ALEC impacts this issue. If you have not yet done so, please sign up for 2 of the breakout sessions over here in the corner. It's hanging on the wall. So we'll do the first breakout session, and then at noon we will break for lunch. At 12:45, we'll come back together for our second breakout session, and then we will meet back in Miller Hall to do our to watch a short video and do our closing and hear from Tate Anderson, who is going to be our closing speaker, who is organizing a protest that is going to be happening on Wednesday of next week. So with that, ALEC. I first heard about the American Legislative Exchange Council in college after hearing the acronym casually thrown around by some of my more politically savvy classmates at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, where I was a political science major. I thought that they were being very dramatic when they were saying, oh, ALEC has all of this influence, you know, ALEC this, ALEC that. I thought they might have been exaggerating for effect. But then I actually started doing my own research, and I was absolutely amazed by how many issues ALEC affects, which you can see by the number of people on the stage. It's not just 1 or 2 issues that they work on. If you go to their website, alec.org, and look under their issues, they're working on 26 different issues right now. And that's just what they're publicly disclosing that they're working on. So they have a hand in so many different issues, and that's bringing us all together into the room today. So, despite its success in state legislatures around the country, ALEC is a widely unknown organization. How many of you knew about ALEC before today? That's amazing. Because when I have been planning this event for the past 2 months, and so many of my friends have asked me, who are pretty politically savvy people, have asked me, what have you been working on? Oh, the American Legislative Exchange Council is coming to town, ALEC. And they look at me like, what's ALEC? I've never heard of ALEC before. And there's a very good reason for that. Even though ALEC has been around for 40 years, they have just been completely out of the public eye. They operate in the shadows. All of their meetings are closed off to the public, and they really don't want any kind of press or media. So the only way that we're going to be able to tackle the beast that is ALEC is really getting the word and getting educated about all the different issues that they have rolling. So, as long as ALEC is allowed to operate in the shadows, outside the public eye, they will continue to distort our democracy by creating laws that benefit some of the wealthiest corporations instead of the public. Our only hope to slay this beast is to come together and fight back as one. The wide breadth of ALEC's issues serves as a double-edged sword. While it gives them the power to influence a wide swath of American policy, it also brings together a wide array of groups together to fight a common enemy. Whether your passion is fighting climate change, ensuring that every American can successfully cast a ballot, or preserving quality public education for future generations, I can assure you that this is all of our fight. So this is what I love about this, is the intersectionality of our work. Recognizing that your struggle is my struggle, and that we're all here fighting a common enemy, and that's why I'm so happy to have you all here today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Elena Nunez, who is the Executive Director at Colorado Common Cause, who will introduce you to our panelists. Please help me in welcoming Elena.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Caroline, and thanks everyone who's out here on a Saturday morning to come together and talk about ALEC. I do want to take just a moment of moderator privilege and ask you all to join me in thanking Caroline for all of her work putting this event together. So I don't want to belabor the points that Caroline made, because I think she did a great job setting up the importance of the work we're all doing here today. ALEC is not a single issue organization. The work that they do impacts all of our organizations, so coming together and exploring those intersections is really important. Yeah, my mic just broke. There we go. All right, let's try this again. Is that any better? Can you hear me in the back? And you can hear me in the front. All right, great. So, it really is important to explore these intersections between our different issues, and I really want to get to that. I do want to take just a few minutes, though, to talk about Common Cause's connection to the American Legislative Exchange Council, because this is an issue that's been of interest to us for several years. For those of you who are not familiar with Common Cause, we work to make sure that every person has a voice in our democracy. And we do that by fighting for the rights of every eligible voter to cast a ballot without barriers. And that's a fight that is just getting more and more intense these days. We also work to reduce the influence of money on our political process and the influence that special interests have in shaping policy, which obviously has a direct connection to ALEC. And then finally, we work to promote government accountability and transparency. So those are issues that are really near and dear to us, and as part of that work, we have been tracking the work of the American Legislative Exchange Council for several years. And that work includes trying to expose ALEC's attempts to take advantage of the tax code. They are actually a tax-exempt organization, which means that the money that corporations give to ALEC to lobby on their behalf is a tax write-off. And they often get special exemptions in state laws to allow them to wine and dine and influence legislators in spite of strong ethics laws. So we've done a lot of work on that. The panel today, though, is going to really delve into the different issues that ALEC works on and then spend some time pulling them all together. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce our many panelists and then give them a chance to talk about their issues. We do want to leave some time to actually tease out how these issues intersect, allow you to ask questions. So we'll just jump in. So first I'm going to introduce Blake Reed. Blake studies, teaches, and practices in the intersection of law, policy, and technology. He's an assistant clinical professor at Colorado Law and is a faculty director at the Silicon Flatiron Center. Discussing the negative impact that ALEC has on communities of color is Pamela Resendes. Pamela is a queer, undocumented immigrant from Mexico. They grew up in the suburbs outside Dallas, Texas, and are a graduate of the University of Texas at San Antonio. Pamela advocates for the rights of workers and immigrants and looks forward to building community in Colorado as the managing director for Uniting for a New Economy. Here to delve into the topic of public education is Alana Dubin-Spiegel. Alana has been actively involved in education for 25 years as a classroom teacher, staff developer, education author, grassroots activist, and the parent of 4 children in public schools. She's a board member of Taxpayers for Public Education. Joining us to talk about Tabor and tax reform is Thamana Basan. Thamana is the economic policy analyst at the Colorado Fiscal Institute. She's a self-proclaimed data nerd whose work focuses on transit, immigration, transportation, Medicaid, race, and the state budget. Luis Toro is the executive director at Colorado Ethics Watch, is here to discuss how ALEC protects the influence of special interests in our political system. Luis is a Colorado attorney with 25 years of experience and a graduate of the law school at the University of California, Berkeley. Joining us to talk about ALEC's impact on environmental issues is Hilda Nusetnik. Hilda is the program director for Protégete Our Air, Our Health, which is a program of Conservation Colorado. She's passionate about fighting against climate change by promoting clean energy for a healthy future for all Coloradans. Here to discuss ALEC's impact on voting rights is Carla Castello. As the executive director of Mi Familia Vota Colorado, Carla works throughout the state to advance civic engagement efforts in the Latino community. Discussing the impact of ALEC on workers' rights is Paul Booth, who recently retired as the executive assistant to the president of ASC. Over the past 50 years, Paul has worked in the union movement as an organizer and leader. He helped form the State Unity Table, which has coordinated the defense of worker rights in state legislatures and has played a large role in the Stand Up to ALEC network. And last, but certainly not least, we're pleased to have Jenna Ozels with us to discuss how women in the LGBT community are affected by ALEC and similar organizations. Jenna is the political director at NARAL Pro-Choice Colorado and currently serves on the board of Emerge Colorado. Please join me in welcoming all of our panelists. So without further ado, I want to just dive in and have folks talk about how these issues work together. So let's start with Kamana. ALEC uses the Colorado Taxpayer Bill of Rights, commonly known as TABOR, as a model for their state economic policy. And I know this is something we could spend more than one day talking about, but tell us a little bit about how TABOR has had an impact on the state of Colorado.
Just as a little bit of background for folks who are not familiar, TABOR is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and it is a constitutional provision and constraint within our state constitutions. It's not statute, it's constitutional, that was put in place in 1992. So in essence, in 1992, we calcified this really bad tax and budget policy that has constrained our legislators in our state for the last 20 plus years. And there's a number of negative impacts of TABOR, and the biggest one, I think, and we'll kind of keep it high level, and I'm more than happy to talk about this more in the breakout session, is that TABOR forces large cuts to services that we all care about, whether it's the environment, whether it's immigration, whether it's, education is a big one. TABOR really limits what legislators are able to do. And so one of the things is that ties budgets to a kind of arbitrary inflation and population growth measures. It requires voter approval for tax increases and debts. It basically ties the hands of legislators to really embrace a lot of that population boom and economic boom that we hear about and that we see in our state. So the impacts, in short, have been that, in 1992 and the early 90s, we were kind of in the middle on most important indicators. We were sort of in the middle for education, for higher ed. We were funding things. We were not funding them as highly as some other states maybe, but we were doing a pretty good job of meeting the needs that, people have in the state. But unfortunately, since then, we've not been able to really kind of embrace that economic growth that we've also seen in this time, and we've not been able to face a lot of the economic downturns that we've also seen during this time. So we've seen, per pupil funding fall from 23rd in ranking to 40th. We rank 40th per pupil funding. We rank our students about $2,000 less per pupil than the national average, not in the highest, it was the average. It means that we have created a state of have and have-nots. We created this, what we like to call, this really wonky, balkanization, right? So we created communities in which if you are rich, if you are wealthy, you can have things, but if you are lower income, and particularly in communities of color, those resources are lacking. So we created this sort of balkanization, we created a situation in which certain Coloradans have access to good education, and a lot of other Coloradans don't. Certain Coloradans have access to good roads and transportation and transit options, and other Coloradans don't. And TABOR really forces legislators to make some really difficult choices in what they can and are willing to fund in the state. And, I'll bring you back to something that's happening right now and that's really present for all of us. Healthcare is a big issue. And we hear a lot from folks in DC that if we want, if states want to continue to fund Medicaid, they can pick up that tab and they can pay for it. If states want to continue to fund healthcare the way that we've been funding it, they can continue to do that and just going to get less federal dollars. In Colorado, because of TABOR and this legislation that ALEC is pushing in other states as well, we don't have that option. We cannot provide that care even if we wanted to. Legislators don't have that option because it's a little bit of a Sophie's choice. Either you fund education, fund roads, or you fund healthcare, and all schools go down to 4 days a week, if not less. We continue to, not pay teachers as much as the rest of the country does. And so really what this does is it concentrates wealth among the wealthy. It concentrates all of this economic prosperity we've seen as a state among corporations and the wealthy, because ALEC also pairs this labor legislation that we take around the country with really terrible tax policy, where they say, let's stop taxing the rich. They literally say that. They don't want to tax the rich, they don't want to tax corporations, they don't want to tax the profit that corporations make, and they don't want any of that to be contributing to the public sector, the things that we all like and want in our communities. And so what it really does is, at CFI we often say, we work for an economy that works for everybody. We want widespread economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or ability. And Taylor makes it so that that can't be the reality in the state that we live in. We cannot all take part in this economic prosperity. Instead, it gets really, really calcified in our state budget that the wealth is kind of concentrated among the very, very few, and the rest of us are out of luck. So that's a little bit about how Taylor impacts Colorado and how it might impact other states if they were impacted.
Great, thank you so much. So I'd now like to have Hilda talk a little bit about ALEC's work on climate change, and also about some of their historic work trying to dismantle the EPA. And of course, I think we have to acknowledge that in this environment, the EPA now is perhaps complicit in that work, but just kind of talk a little bit about their environmental track record.
Of course, and it is super important to know that ALEC has received about $1.4 million from ExxonMobil in the past decade. So when we're thinking from 1998 through 2009, that amount of money was funded solely from oil and gas industry. So throughout this time, really, the priority has been for ALEC to not stop the status quo of oil and gas and fossil fuels in the United States, making sure that that transition is going to be very difficult for states to be able to complete as well. And what we're seeing currently with with the EPA, it's really interesting. As the head of the EPA, this work previously to it as the Attorney General of Oklahoma was focused on making sure that there was not overreach of agencies over states, which has been the narrative that ALEC has fixated in elected officials over oil and gas industry, which has truly affected the outcome of policy surrounding public land seizure. So when we're looking at public land seizure, the narrative has been, let's give the rights to states to know what's best for states to do with their public lands. But naturally, this public lands is being sold to be able to require oil and gas from these areas, be able to extract fossil fuels, which has been twisting that narrative of making sure that our states have more control and quite doing the opposite. The way that and I think in Colorado we have been able to battle this, has been making sure that public lands are pretty much a political thoroughbred. That if any politician that starts really messing with the value of our public lands, it would be very difficult for them to continue in office. As we have seen with public lands in Colorado currently, the outdoor industry actually is creating more income than the oil and gas industry. That is a huge value in Colorado. When the public and outdoors industry has really moved from what it used to be in Utah to really move into Colorado and being able to develop that economic value that Coloradans have on our public lands. So really being able to mediate that narrative that ALEC has really tried to create within our communities of having that state power in understanding that regulation, federal regulation is good for Colorado. And being able to flip that narrative for in public lands and on our environment has been essential. As well, we have seen an attack on rooftop solar. And it has been seen, and a message that has been driven has been as a free riders of the system, making it seem that utilizing the structure that has been built for rooftop solar, that it's kind of taking advantage of the system that the monopoly on electricity has been created. So really, ALEC's function has been infiltrating the environmental movement and creating a negative narrative around many of the puzzle pieces for a just transition in the environmental movement. When we're seeing that rooftop solar, it's one of the ways that our community is going to be able to get those tax credits to move forward to that transition. That has been a huge impact that they wanted that they have been able to infiltrate through that language. And right now, more than ever, we see that attack as the head of the EPA has only seen that as a narrative and infiltrated it as an attorney general in Oklahoma and wants to continue doing it. But that is when right now we need to more than ever highlight that local leadership that we have had in Colorado. That thanks to that, Colorado values public land so much that Colorado, for the first time, we had a Colorado public land state, which we had over 80 events happening that same day, highlighting the importance of our public lands, making sure that public lands are not taken federally, making sure that we are creating the easiest mechanisms for our communities to be able to access rooftop solar. So I think it's being able to create and continue to have our local leadership that knows and understands the values of Colorado and will protect those values.
So I think it's interesting that in the stories that both Hilda and Vamana told, there was definitely a connection to corporate interests influencing policy for their own bottom line, which is certainly a recurring theme with ALEC. So let's delve into that a little bit more and talk about the problem of corporate money in politics in the post-Citizens United era, and then specifically how it connects to ALEC and their state-level lobbying work. Luis?
Thank you. Citizens United was one step, probably the most important step in a long march of the Supreme Court and bad decisions that have extended First Amendment rights to corporations and equated spending money with speech itself. Now, ALEC on one level doesn't have that much to do with that because ALEC, as ALEC, doesn't get involved in financing elections and so forth. It's really more of a lobbying group. And corporations have already been allowed to lobby along with disclosure, but acting as kind of a think tank for the conservative movement, ALEC has really pushed not just for unlimited spending by corporations in elections, but also for secrecy. They passed a resolution that they said was supporting Citizens United, but it really wasn't supporting Citizens United because Citizens United said two things. One is that corporations should be treated as having the same First Amendment rights as everyone else, and therefore, because spending is speech, restricting their spending is the same thing as restricting speech itself. So that's the part we don't like. The other part, though, said that corporations and other people spending on elections can be required to disclose the source of their money, even for ads that don't specifically say to vote for or against a candidate. So that part of Citizens United, they actually don't like. And in the resolution supporting Citizens United, they actually put in there, but we're against disclosing who paid for money in politics, because that's an infringement on free speech. The think tank side of ALEC has really been kind of promoting this idea dark money should be rebranded as anonymous free speech money, and that obviously is not caught. But they're going to, I'm sure they're working with their focus groups to come up with a better alternative to dark money, a little bit more catchy. But they've also tried to tar and feather the movement for disclosure of money in elections as being somehow tyrannical. And they'd like to say that if we had our way, Thomas Paine would have been required to disclose who was funding his revolutionary pamphlets. The problem with that is it's still illegal to advocate armed insurrection against the United States government. So actually, you can't, what Thomas Paine was doing actually would be illegal. And it was illegal under the British, and it was successful because he won. But that's, I don't think the First Amendment is meant to protect calls for armed insurrection. Sorry. Perhaps realizing that they've kind of moved on to saying, well, Alexander Hamilton wrote the Federalist Papers anonymously, and the liberals love Hamilton, right? And they would have required Hamilton to disclose that he was the author of many of the Federalist Papers. Well, what's really funny about that is that by invoking Hamilton and saying his example should be followed is admitting that knowing who's behind a political message goes to credibility. Credibility matters, and so it's important to know if we believe a message is more valuable because Alexander Hamilton said it, we also should have a right to know that spending behind an election is motivated, for ballot issues, is motivated by, say, the bail bond industry. In my group, Ethics Watch, we had a case a few years ago about non-disclosure on a ballot issue election, which was about getting rid of pretrial detention supervised by courts and replacing it with corporate-funded bail bonds for all cases. And the proponent said, we're a bunch of concerned citizens who were worried about criminals running around loose in our cities, and the opposition said, no, you're not, you're the bail bond industry. Well, guess what? Once we forced the disclosures, we found out it was the bail bond industry. So it's important to know, knowing that it was the bail bond industry behind that initiative is valuable information to voters in evaluating whether that ballot initiative really was about safety or was it about increasing profits for bail bond companies. And that's just one of many, many examples where knowing who the corporate sponsors of political messages can help you evaluate the credibility of this message. So what we see with ALEC is more as a lobbying group, and Common Cause has an IRS complaint about this, is that they essentially acting as a lobbying group without following disclosure laws or in violation of their C3 nonprofit status. It's like super PACs, it's kind of the lobbying version of a super PAC, where the same corporations who would fund a super PAC fund ALEC, and ALEC is really more the think tank or the legislative incubator for these ideas, and like, as with the corporate money in elections, they don't want you to know that the NRA is funding them, or ExxonMobil is funding them, or these other groups. So it's not a direct connection to Citizens United, and they don't, mostly ALEC, because ALEC itself doesn't get involved in spending on elections, but what they do is promote the fight against transparency in political spending, and so that's really where they need to be called out and identified as being really against the people being able to cast an informed ballot by knowing who's spending money to influence them in elections.
Thanks, Louise. So I think it would be helpful to kind of shift to the other piece of what happens with the ballot box. So ALEC certainly has been working to make it harder for us to know who's spending money on elections, but the other, I think, really insidious work that they do is to make it harder for eligible voters to cast their ballots. So Carla, can you talk a little bit about the role of ALEC in going the attack on voting rights, and then who's really impacted by those attacks?
Absolutely. Thank you, Elena. I first want to call attention to ALEC and the name, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Doesn't that sound so friendly to you? We will go ahead and exchange money for bills that affect our community in such a negative way. One of the ways that Elena already talked about and that affects the work that Mi Familia does in a tremendous way is limiting the access to the people that we want to serve and empower to participate in our democratic system. So what ALEC really does in terms of voting rights is, or I like to call it voter suppression, is limit people from voting by seeking bills that seek to make it more difficult for voters to access that ballot box. Voter ID loss to many is a controversial topic. Why? Because everyone is supposed to have an ID, right? We all are born with an ID. You can't do anything without an ID. But if you register to vote, if you're a citizen, then you have the right to vote. There should be no questions about that. You're a citizen, you have the right to vote. If something's not broken, don't fix it, right? Why would we want to limit the access of our community to make such important decisions as who represents them? I want to read you some of the stats that I have here so that it puts things into context. Millions of Americans lack ID. So about 11% of US citizens lack an ID. Back to the question that I want to ask, who does this specifically impact? You probably would guess it. It impacts people of minority descent. It impacts people who are college students, the elderly, and people who don't have money, low income individuals. So again, 11% of US citizens, or more than 21 Americans, do now have a government-issued photo ID, which many of these laws are enacting. They're specifically asking for a federal form of ID. So they're not necessarily taking your work badge. It has a photo and it has your name on it, and if you're working, then most likely you have the permission. Also, if you register to vote, you have already provided the information that the government needs in order for you to exercise that right? Voter IDs, really what they do is reduce the voter turnout. So as you can imagine, this is something that is incredibly important for us as an organization that mobilizes voters. Specifically those who we're targeting, who don't necessarily have the access or the information to be able to be engaged. I want to talk about how ALEC makes sure that this is possible. And this is not necessarily 100% connected, but we hear this national narrative that voter fraud exists, right? What was just created by the current administration is a commission that seeks to find, you know what, who has time to do that? Who has time to look for a problem that doesn't exist? But anyway, they're looking to find issues within our system, right? So they've asked Colorado Secretary of State, along all of the other states, to provide data for voters. What do voters do in exchange? We have seen incredible rates of people going into their county clerks and withdrawing their voter registration because they don't want their information out there. If you're any of those people, please make sure that you don't do that. The information that the Secretary of State in Colorado would go ahead and provide to this commission is public information. So they're not going to be providing any type of information that is not already public. So your ID, no one knows how you voted also, first of all. That's, you know, if anyone tells you that that's the case, that's not true. But anyway, this type of narrative buys in to this misconception that there's an actual problem when there's not. I would urge you to look into the letter that the Secretary of State Williams in Colorado has sent the commission, where it clearly states some of the cases that he has seen, and they're very isolated cases. If there's a thorough explanation on what it is, who has done it, obviously not why and how they voted, right? But these are isolated cases. They don't necessarily threaten our democracy. We are working every single day to make sure that our democracy is working for everyone, not just the ones that have money. And so ALEC is one of those drivers that seeks to limit our access, and we're going to continue to fight against that.
Thanks, Carla. So Carla just mentioned the Commission on Voter Fraud, which has certainly been getting a lot of attention. Let's delve into the other issue, I think, that is at the top of all of the headlines. In 2011, ALEC published the State Legislator's Guide to Repealing Obamacare. So, Janet, can you talk a little bit about the repeal of the Affordable Care Act and how that would impact women's health and access to reproductive services?
Absolutely. So, I love the way that this question is asked, because it is the question is the State Legislator's Guide to Repealing Obamacare. Here's the thing about groups like ALEC. So all of you, you're here in a hot church basement on your Saturday, and I just like to take a quick show of hands. We saw earlier who had heard of ALEC before they came in. Who here has heard of Alliance Defending Freedom? Okay. Who here has heard of Americans United for Life? Okay. That's actually better than most rooms that I'm in, so congratulations to you. So here's the thing, because of groups like ALEC and because of their success on state levels of implementing what I basically like to call Mad Lib legislation, you have a bill, it's like insert state here, and you can just kind of hand it off to one of your legislators and go have them run it. Because of the success of groups like ALEC, we have seen the rise of numerous other legislation bills that are targeting numerous different types of issues. So Alliance Defending Freedom, and I hate that they call themselves that because they sound like a supervillain group in like Marvel Comics or something like that. They are an anti-LGBTQ organization. What they do is they try and come in and do exactly what ALEC does on state levels against the LGBTQ community. Americans United for Life, my personal nemesis, are the ones who come in and do the exact same thing on choice issues. They go after, fetal tissue disposal was one of the ones that they decided to come up with a few years after the fraudulent videos that they came out with. So we, unfortunately, while I hate to be the bearer of bad news, getting to know ALEC is a huge, wonderful first step, but the next step is figuring out who the rest of these groups are. They are typically funded by similar types of donors, similar types of organizations, and they all kind of work together. A couple of years ago, NARAL published a report called Against Our Will, how national anti-choice groups are targeting the pro-choice majority in Colorado. I left a couple of them in the back. Hopefully they're already all gone because they're 30-page reports, so I only printed up a few. I do have a few more for the breakout sessions, but that's going to really dive into a lot more of these state-level pieces of legislation that have been run. Why is this important? Well, since 2011, we have actually seen well over 300 anti-choice pieces of legislation be passed in state legislatures across the country. Over 300. That is huge. And yes, thank you. Yeah, very much boo, right? Very, very boo. And what these have done, we have already seen women being tried for miscarriages in Indiana. This is a thing. Thank you, Vice President Mike Pence. He signed that bill into law. We see them run it in Colorado. Last year, they ran 5 pieces of model anti-choice legislation. That's the lowest amount that they have run since I started at NARAL 3 years ago. So it doesn't mean it's getting better. It just means that they put more models into one bill. One of them literally had 12 model bills in one piece of legislation, and it was in committee within 36 hours of being introduced. So that was a really fun day. But when we're talking about Obamacare specifically, while there is this huge federal push right now, a lot of the ways that this is going to impact women's health care is, of course, around Medicaid funding. I'm going to let Pam go into how that's going to affect some of our more lower-income communities in a little while, but this new bill that we're seeing has some pretty crazy stuff in it. So not only does it never mention women, those headlines are actually true. The only time that the word women or woman is mentioned in the entire new bill is when you're talking specifically about abortion care and how it's not allowed. That's really it. And so what you do when you are writing and advocating for legislation that does not mention women or does not mention non-binary individuals or anything like that, you are setting a standard that the cis male body is the standard, and that there is absolutely no other type of healthcare that anybody could need. Being forgotten in legislation is actually almost worse than being actively targeted for numerous different reasons, because if your body, I mean, men don't need pregnancy care, they don't need cervical screenings, they don't need, they don't need therapy because they don't go through menopause. There are just certain things that men just do not go through, and so when you're not talking about women's health care, it ends up very, very dangerous. And another one of the crazy things that this new bill does, and a lot of this comes from ideas that ALEC puts forth, and have been putting forth in state legislatures across the country for years, is that they like to get complicated. They like to make it complicated so that you can't follow it, and so that it's difficult for organizations like us to explain. If you can't be a bumper sticker politician, if you can't sum up what you want to say in a bumper sticker, you're going to miss a lot of people, because they just simply don't have the time or the patience for it. I have a lot of things that I could rant about that, but we don't have the time. So one of the things that the new AHCA does, which is the repeal, it doesn't let private companies choose whether or not they can choose to cover abortion services. Now, there are private insurance companies that do voluntarily choose to do that. I work at Choice, Colorado, and we got our new healthcare in a couple of years ago, and we were shopping around for it. We figured, hey, you know what? Our health insurance should cover abortion care. Our company provides it. And with this new bill, they would basically be barred from being able to do that, which is horrifying. And it's great that they want to cover it. And there's in Colorado alone, we see 550,000 women of childbearing age who are actually covered by insurance providers that cover abortion services, or at least can choose to do so. This new bill would not allow them to do that. The other thing that is absolutely insane is that it allows states to opt in or opt out of 10 essential health services that the ACA implemented. A lot of these, again, have ties to Medicaid, but things like benefits like mental health, things like pediatric dental and vision care. How can you possibly say that you are pro-life or truly pro-choice if you are not supporting policies that help women make decisions they actually want to make for themselves, and not what their economic decision dictates for them? And what those policies are things like making sure that if they do choose to have children, that those children have access to health care, and that they have access to paid family leave in order to take care of those children when they get sick. Things like this. How can you call yourself pro-life or pro-choice if you don't believe in these types of things? The other thing that they want is they want to be able to let states cut out maternity and newborn care. The United States, despite supposedly being a first world country, has seen a huge, drastic increase in maternal mortality rates in the past several years. And a lot of that is because of these model legislation bills that have been passed in state legislatures across the country, which I can dive into a little bit more later. But hopefully that answers it, and thanks for having me here.
So let's shift gears just a little bit. One of the issues we've talked less about, but I think is really significant, is the influence of ALEC on attacking workers' rights and privatizing public services. So Paul, tell us a little bit about that.
History first, then civics. The ALEC attack on unions and worker rights had its roots in labor's success in its growth in the shape of the 4 million American workers who were able to unionize during the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. The ALEC attack was a reaction to that. It was a political reaction. It was mainly a reaction to the reality that Republicans, in a bipartisan way, had fully cooperated in the enactment of the laws that opened the door for all those workers, for public employees, for hospital and long-term health care workers, for teachers, for child care workers, to organize unions and to achieve a democratic voice at work. ALEC is obviously the transmission belt for reactionary legislation in America, but it is also, and maybe just as importantly, an instrument of political alignment. It has been an instrument of political alignment, establishing a party line and driving pro-labor, pro-choice, pro-environment, pro-civil rights, and other kinds of moderates, either altogether out of the Republican Party or marginalizing them into the fringes. Just listen to this list of Republican governors who enacted collective bargaining laws. Mark Hatfield in Oregon, George Romney in Michigan, John Chafee in Rhode Island, Nelson Rockefeller in New York, Daniel Evans in Washington, Ronald Reagan, have you heard of him, in California, Dean Davis in Vermont, Raymond Schaefer in Pennsylvania, Francis Sargent in Massachusetts, Tom McCall in Oregon, Robert Ray in Iowa, Meldrum Thompson in Vermont, in New Hampshire. 12 of them in 12 years between 1963 and 1975. All Republicans, and those laws produced most of the growth that revived the American labor movement. A revival that occasioned the backlash because the main leaders of the Republican Party recognized that a powerful labor, a newly empowered labor movement, was an obstacle to their real agenda, the agenda of making the rich richer and freeing corporations from accountability and from regulations. 1977, ALEC was created. July 1981, Ronald Reagan, now the President of the United States, crushed the Air Traffic Controllers Union and called on governors and mayors to profit from his example. It was a strategic calculation to lift labor issues to the top of their priorities. And then there they were in 2011 when the Republican State Leadership Committee, when its plan delivered Republican governors, Republican state legislative majorities in state after state, in Alabama, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in New Hampshire, and 2 years later in North Carolina, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was there ready to be enacted. The anti-union measures have been part of a long-term strategy, which is the strategy to defund and demobilize their opposition. Tort reform, to take trial lawyers out of the game. Paycheck deduction bills, to take organized labor out of the game. Intimidation of immigrants. Defunding Planned Parenthood. Voter identification. All priorities because they make a permanent, sustainable, right-wing rule more possible. Democracy is in peril. The Scott Walker, Art Pope, Jeff Sessions team are ruthless wielders of power, like Nixon was. But hemmed in by weaker checks and balances than hemmed in Richard Nixon, and much less sensitive to the civil liberties of the opposition than, for example, we are. 2018 is now or never. And it's state politics where we have to focus. And that's hard, because most people, including most of our friends, pay little attention to state government. Much more to local affairs, or to Trump and the Congress. So we must embark on a great civics refresher course. We must make visible the state legislators of ALEC, who are driving the right-wing train, who are, in fact, the swamp. They are the swamp. Of everything that is going on today, the fight against Trump here, the Russian investigation, all of that, nothing is more important than what we are doing here today at this teach-in. Let us join together to be the civics teachers of the resistance. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. And I want to take a few minutes now to delve one more issue that I think really highlights where ALEC has been incredibly successful, and that is as a proponent of school choice and advocating for legislation that supports charter schools and voucher programs. So Alana, if you could talk about the impact on public education, and then for our last couple of speakers, we'll then shift into starting to tie all of this together.
Great, thank you so much. When I was first sent this question, how has school choice affected public education? I sat there and stared at my computer screen, and all I had on there was the word bad. Like it's just been bad. Since school choice legislation has been enacted, we have seen no increases in achievement, which was promised. We've seen widening gaps by race, income, and disability status. And school choice legislation has fundamentally undermined our faith and trust in the public education system. Like Paul, however, I'd like to do a little history talk here, though, to understand where some of this came from. If you go back to 1954, right, many of us remember, we're either alive then or remember learning in school about Brown versus the Board of Education. That was when the Supreme Court said black and white students, you could not have separate schools. That was unconstitutional to have separate schools for black and white students. A decade later, Lyndon B. Johnson, as part of the civil rights legislation, authorized the elementary and secondary education. That was civil rights legislation that both Brown and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act were expanding our vision of democracy and the role of education and opportunities for all citizens. They were founded on the premise that education is essential if we are to preserve and enhance a representative government. This concept of public education is indispensable to a democracy. Meanwhile, on a parallel path, an economist named Milton Friedman, a white academic from Chicago, was the first to create and advocate for school choice and vouchers for two reasons: discrimination and profit. Just 1 year after the Brown versus the Board of Education, Friedman said, privately conducted schools can develop exclusively white schools, exclusively colored schools, and mixed schools. Friedman's belief was that corporations should be able to profit from education and run schools, not the public. In 1997, he wrote Public Schools Make Them Private, and argued that vouchers were a means to make a transition from the government to a market system. Vouchers would enable a private, for-profit industry to develop that would provide a wide variety of learning opportunities and offer effective competition to public schools. In 2006, Milton Friedman told the ALEC conference that the ideal would be to completely eliminate and abolish the public school system. That's right. Milton Friedman's ideal was to stack schools by both race, income, and disability status so that corporations could profit from them. So I'm sure many of you are wondering, well, who bankrolled this plan? Well, who's our current Secretary of Education? Betsy DeVos and the DeVos family in Michigan essentially bankrolled this plan along with the Koch brothers to privatize public education through a very nice sounding idea called school choice. So from 1990 to 2015, thanks to ALEC and funding from the DeVosses and the Koch brothers, lawmakers in more than 40 states in the District of Columbia have enacted a large array of charter and choice laws that have their roots in discrimination and corporate profit. In Colorado in particular, ALEC legislation that has been sponsored and passed by Democrats and Republicans include the Innovation Schools and Districts Act, the READ Act, the Public School Financial Transparency Act, which is fundamentally a backdoor way to expose public employees' retirement systems, the Great Teachers and Great Leaders Act, or Senate Bill 10191, which ties teachers' jobs to students' test scores. Many of these types those sound really good in theory, but fundamentally the goal of ALEC and Betsy DeVos and the Koch brothers' education legislation is not to reform our public education system. It is to replace it with a private, market-based system. One of the ways we've seen this play out locally is ALEC promoting its model legislation policies such as a parental choice scholarship program in Douglas County. It does this through its School Choice Academy. This ALEC conference trains legislators and interested persons in how to plan, package, and sell an array of school choice options. The conference includes everything from adopting, selling, and defending a choice program. Sponsors of school choice academies have been major donors to school board candidates in Douglas County, which then created and supported the ALEC-based school choice scholarship programs, which is a voucher program to use scholarships that give parents their choice of schools. It draws exclusively on state rather than local money, and they claim compliance with compelled support clauses in the Blaine Amendment. Colorado, along with 36 other states, has a Blaine Amendment which prohibits taxpayers' funds from going to religious institutions. This case has been appealed all the way to the Supreme Court and is currently still undergoing litigation. So let's come back to that original question about how has ALEC, as a proponent of school choice, advocating for legislation affected public education. So I said to you at the beginning that we have not seen increases in achievement. If anything, we've seen widening of gaps. And in fact, recent studies of voucher programs have shown a decrease in achievement that is attributable to the vouchers themselves, to the voucher programs and how they are run. When we say that there's a widening of gaps by race and income and disability status, districts like Denver and Douglas County get A's from ALEC for having a wide array of school choice programs. However, they get F's for actually improving student achievement or narrowing gaps through integration. Fundamentally, ALEC and their school choice legislation has undermined our faith and trust in public schools as democracy in practice. It doesn't matter if you are in Denver, or Douglas County, or Durango. We have all been impacted by this. So thank you.
So now let's tie it together a little bit. One of the themes that has come up with several of the speakers is that the impact of these policies is targeted, and particularly on communities of color. Pamela, can you help us tie this together and talk about how ALEC targets communities of color?
Yes, of course. So thank you so much for having us here. I definitely want to acknowledge that there's not a blanket statement where we can tie how this impacts people of color, right? We acknowledge that there are different categories, you could say, that ALEC puts their resources if that impacts people of color, whether it's in housing, whether it's in environmental access to clean water, the way that impacts fracking, right? The way that impacts education, and that perpetuates the cycle of poverty, specifically among people of color, and the way that it impacts health, right? So and voting rights. So we've talked about all of this, and I also want to uplift that regardless of whatever method of impact the communities of color, the equation is the same for ALEC, which is for profit. I, as an immigrant, as an undocumented immigrant that's with the team, I want to dive a little bit further in terms of mass incarceration, which I think is a way to not only tie it, but the way to acknowledge that the way that they do it systematically, right, and that they do it in mass movement. So I want to talk about the fact that mass incarceration impacts Black communities and Brown communities in a way that profits corporations, which is another thing that we talk about, how all of this, the bottom line, is for profit for corporations.
So we know that 40% of the population that's incarcerated right now is Black men. We know that that is because of the way that they benefit by having bodies, Black and brown bodies, in the prison system or the for-profit detention, right? The way that it impacts voter disenfranchisement in communities of color, making it difficult for immigrants to have a path to citizenship, right? That's something that ALEC has crafted and that they have trickled down so that it's harder for new immigrants or younger generations to have a path to citizenship. I also want to talk about the way that this impacts brown communities. So we know that immigration is a topic that has been at the forefront of this country for a while now, and the way that it's being discussed is in terms of the way that illegal labor or undocumented immigrants impact workers, right? So we have the way that ALEC created the Fair and Legal Employment Act, which is E-Verify, and that impacts the way that undocumented immigrants are able to work or able to apply for jobs, right? Since we know that there's a large undocumented worker population in this country. So that impacts the way that their labor is criminalized and the way that they are attacked for not having documentation. So I also want to talk about the way that mass deportation is occurring and how that is also directly tied for profit because of the way, the ties that CCA, Corrections Corporation of America, and GEO engage with ALEC, right? Even though they may not directly now, since 2010, I believe CCA stepped down from ALEC's council as a dues-paying member or whatever. They're still engaged in the legislation that we have in a lot of the states that is coming up for Show Me Your Papers. Is that exact same legislation that started in 2010 in Arizona. And that was called the No Sanctuary Cities for Illegal Immigrants Act. It's literally word by word SB 1070 that it was enacted in Arizona, SB 90 that y'all had here in Colorado, and what we currently have that is happening in Texas, which is SB 4, where it forces the resources locally as well as police officers to act as federal agents. And because of that, we've had the largest deportation of people of color in the last administration, right? And we know the way that the statements have been made by the current administration of how they're going to ramp up deportation. And that deportation is the mass incarceration. Due to the Private Correctional Facilities Act that ALEC drafted, where they have for-profit of incarceration of people of color. Where they also have the Housing Out-of-State Prisoners in Private Prison Act, which is basically once you're detained or incarcerated, you are moved around from state to state without access to your support network, your family, or your legal representation, making it easier for you to stay in the system because that's for profit. Every day that someone is incarcerated, it's about a profit of $1,000 or so, and that's what they want to have. They want to have the beds full of people of color predominantly, and impacting both multi-generational aspects of how this engages with families, right? How this impacts that family and perpetuates that cycle. We also, exactly. We have a machine of deportation, right? We have a machine of incarceration that marginalizes some people of color. Another way that they're doing this, impacting the way, specifically for immigrants, is the resolution against amnesty. So they have just in no way created resolutions to not move forward with people having the path to become citizens. Because once they become citizens, then they'll have the ability to vote, right? And they want to restrict that. They want to restrict the democratic engagement that people of color can have in this country. Another way that it continues to impact people of color, specifically queer communities and trans communities, is that now that they are making detention centers, they're making now detention centers specifically for people that are transgender. So now they're making a profit specifically in terms of creating facilities specifically for queer immigrants. So now that's a siloing and creating more for-profit and different categories of incarcerating people. And the way that they impact the economy, right? I mentioned the E-Verify, the Fair and Legal Employment Act, but also the way that it impacts the way that they're able to live and survive in this country. And I mean, I just want to go back to the fact that there's not a blanket statement that I can formulate right now in terms of how it impacts people of color, because it literally is impacting people of color in every aspect of their lives, whether it's with health, whether it's with voting, with education, with just the right to work, or the ability to work, and the ability to not live in fear because of deportation, or to stop the cycle of incarcerating Black and brown bodies for profit. Thank you.
I think it's a powerful reminder that these issues are really interrelated and have dramatic impacts on our communities. Our last speaker, Blake, is going to talk about another issue that crosses all issues, not just our ability to participate in the political sphere, but also economically and culturally, and that's the influence that ALEC has had on the issue of net neutrality. So I'll hand it over to ALEC to bring it home.
Just to be clear, my name is not ALEC. My name is Blake. Good morning. How are you guys? Who's hot? All right. So I know I'm in the unenviable position of standing between you and getting out of this hot room. And I'm also going to talk to you about telecom policy. Who's excited about telecom policy? All right. We're going to go fast. So this is like a month of my telecom law course. We're going to do the 3-minute version here. Well, let's motivate this. Who heard about this event? Who heard about this event today? All right, let's do this one. This better? Yeah, there we go. All right, who heard about this event today using the internet? All right, so this is about the future of the internet. That's what net neutrality is all about. It's about protecting the future of the internet. All right, I have to give a quick disclaimer because I'm sitting next to an ethics lawyer. So I'm a professor at Colorado Law. I'm also a director at one of the centers there. I'm also a practicing attorney, and I represent a coalition of national disability organizations who support net neutrality and work on a lot of other telecom issues. My opinions today are my own, not necessarily that of my center or my clients or anybody else. I'm wearing my professor hat, and again, my name is not ALEC, for those of you that didn't hear it on the quiet mic. No, it's okay. So let's briefly explain the significance of net neutrality. Sorry, my name is Blake. Blake Reed, not ALEC. All right. So net neutrality is actually coined at a conference up in Boulder about 15 years ago. A professor named Tim Wu came out with this really provocative phrase. He said, "Network neutrality, broadband discrimination." It's a famous article. Net neutrality is an anti-discrimination principle. It's an anti-discrimination law. And what does it mean? It means ISPs, your internet service provider, can't discriminate against the applications and services and content that you use and you access and you create and you provide on the internet. All right, so I'm assuming there's some folks in here who are old enough to remember the telephone network. Remember we used to use telephones? All right. Now I'm going to go way back. Is anybody old enough to remember the hushaphone? Anybody know what the hushaphone is? Yeah, what's a hushaphone? Sorry, I'm pointing the guy behind you. Yeah, all right, AT&T. Right, so the hushaphone is this little rubber cup you put over the phone, right? Keep your conversation secret. Little rubber thing. AT&T was so powerful when the hushaphone came out. It was in the 1950s. They got the FCC to declare that the hushaphone was a danger to the network, right? They had so much control over it, and that's how the telephone network was, right? All of this innovation, all of the exciting stuff came from the middle of the network, so you had to count on AT&T. And AT&T didn't have a lot of competition in those days. This is the only one, the monopoly. When we talk about monopolies, AT&T is the monopoly. Like they're driving around a little silver car and wearing a little silver hat. The internet turns all that inside out. So we've got what we call a dumb network. And we don't mean dumb like it's not smart, but it doesn't do much. It just transfers the traffic all over it. All the cool stuff, instead of happening in the middle of the network, it happens at the edge of the network. So the websites, social media, email, messaging, collaboration software, newspapers, ebooks, music, all those cat videos that I know you like to watch. It all comes from people and companies who are at one edge of the network, transmitting over this dumb network to people on the other edge of the network, all right? So whatever you want to do, whatever you want to use, consume, create on the internet, you decide. You don't have to ask anyone's permission to do that. So when we wanted to get this event together today, we didn't have to go ask the phone company if that was okay to organize. We get to go use a variety of collaboration tools to do it. And that's why the internet is so powerful. So how might internet service providers influence that? So there's still a monopoly. All right, I'm going to get technical for a second here. There's going to be a quiz later. I'll cold call folks if I have to. It's called a terminating access monopoly. So what that means is if you are a subscriber of Comcast or Verizon or AT&T or any other internet service provider, they have a monopoly over you. So if someone wants to deliver content over the network to you, they've got to go through your internet service provider. So they're in a position of really tremendous power on the network. And so what might they do to leverage that power? They might restrict the kind of devices that you put in the network. So in the early days of the internet, when people started putting out Wi-Fi hotspots, you can't imagine living without Wi-Fi now. But there were actually telecom companies that said, no, you can't put a Wi-Fi hotspot on your internet connection, because then you might be able to share the connection with more than one computer, and they don't like that. They might choose to restrict what types of applications you access on the internet. So for example, you used to have landline telephone service, and suddenly this new thing called voice over IP comes along, and they say, ooh, that might cut into our other telephone business. We don't like that. We might block or degrade the quality of that voice over IP service and stop you from using it. We might take money from certain people and give them, you guys have heard of fast lanes and slow lanes, we might prioritize their traffic over somebody that doesn't pay us, right? They might then do some more complicated schemes, and we could talk about this in the breakout session, like zero rating, if you've heard of that. So we can talk through more of that. The ISP's got all of these ways to influence, given their position on the network, what you do on it. So right now, all of these practices are illegal under the FCC's net neutrality rules, that if you've heard them called the open internet rules. It's talking about the same thing. And they say ISPs can't block lawful traffic that goes over the internet. So if what you're doing is lawful, it cannot be blocked. It cannot be throttled. And there's no paid prioritization. So ISPs can't take money to prioritize certain traffic over others. And there's also a transparency rule, which says they have to tell you what they are selling you. They have to tell you how fast your internet connection is. If they have network management practices, they have to tell you what they are. They have to educate you so you can go online when you're making decisions about what service to buy and get. And there are all sorts of other issues, including privacy, that are tied up in this, and again, we can get on a lot more detail. And what's at stake right now is the FCC is on the verge of repealing the net neutrality rules under the Trump administration. And so how this ties into ALEC, so one of the Republican FCC commissioners, Commissioner O'Reilly, spoke at ALEC's conference in May. And he urged ALEC's members to resist net neutrality. And it's pretty typical sort of free market rhetoric. He said, net neutrality is misguided screaming. It's an effort to use the government as a means to redistribute hard-earned assets from one group of people, ISPs, to another. It's slowly but surely seeking to drag the economy towards socialism. It's a component in a larger, much more pernicious effort to vanquish capitalism and economic liberty. And so this is pretty much mirrors ALEC's position on this, which is basically that competition is going to protect consumers. We don't need to have rules that protect your ability to do what you want on the internet because there's going to be competition. All right, we're going to do a little experiment here. This is dangerous. All right, all at once, on the count of three. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to shout out, who is your internet service provider at home? Now, I'm not going to prejudge the outcome of this, but I'm guessing you might hear like one or two things. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, I think I heard Comcast CenturyLink, all one word. All right, so we don't have a lot of choices. That's a problem with this idea, is that if Comcast or CenturyLink engages in something you don't like in terms of what you want to do on the internet, you don't have somewhere else to go. You don't have another provider. You might have one other choice. If you live somewhere rural in Colorado, you might have no choices, or you might not even have access to broadband. So ALEC is trying to get state legislators to get engaged in this effort and oppose net neutrality. And they rely on the fact that this stuff sounds kind of boring, right? I think no one's going to notice this, but this is really core to your ability to organize and to engage in your democracy and use the internet as a tool to do that. So let me just say one last thing, which is, what can you do? Well, gosh, it would be great if there's an ability to file comments on this, and there is, and comments are due on Monday, so the FCC's proceeding is right in the thick of it right now. So by Monday, you can participate, you can go file a comment at the FCC. All right, so I spent a lot of time at the FCC. Normally we see things like 50 comments, 100 comments, like no one pays attention to what happens at the FCC. We've got millions of comments on file at the FCC already, so people are really, really excited about that. I am not a telecom policy lawyer, I can't do this. All right, there are lots of organizations that are providing really easy ways to do this, so you can get online and go file a comment and tell the FCC how the internet is important to you. So just a couple, battleforthenet.com, the Electronic Frontier Foundation has a website called dearfcc.org, and we can talk in the workshop if you want suggestions about what you might include in your comment, and we can sort of talk through that. Thanks.
Thank you. And if you're like me, you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed now by all of the issues we have to face, fear not. We're going to delve in. We're going to go into breakout rooms so we can talk more about both the problems but also the solutions and how we can continue to make connections. So I'm going to hand it over to Caroline to lead us into breakouts. But before I do that, please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their information.